When a thoroughbred is born, it has less than a 1% chance of winning a Grade 1 race. So like the Bluegrass Stakes, the Kentucky Derby, the Maker's Mark Mile are all Grade 1s. Horses from Millridge are striking at like a 3% clip. And so that'd be if you want to play in the NBA, you go to the University of Kentucky. If you want to win Grade 1 races, you start at Millridge Farm.
Welcome back to DevelopLex. Today we have a friend of the program, Price Bell. Ross has more of a history with Price and getting to know Price over the last couple of years, but Price is very involved in Lexington, and we've formed a friendship over the last year or so, and we're really excited to welcome on to DevelopLex today. He has a very entrepreneurial background, but also just is involved in so many different facets within Lexington. So I would probably be remiss to introduce you with some sort of job title at a place, because I think there are many different job titles at many different places that you're involved in. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself, if that's okay with you, but welcome to DevelopLex.
Well, thank you. It's a great privilege. I love what you all put together. It's been a great, not only history, and I've learned so much from people I've looked up to through the years. And I think you've done an incredible job of sharing their stories and sharing the stories of Lexington. So y'all been at this like 3 years, 4 years? 3
I think
years.
like 10 or so.
Yeah, 10 years. It's put 10 years on you, but it's you've been at it 3.
Yeah, I think 3 or 4.
It's remarkable. So well done. So it's a great privilege to join the ranks of those who have come before me and those who will look forward to coming after me. My name is Price Bell. I'm the general manager of our family's farm. We are a thoroughbred breeding operation called Millridge Farm. We have been farming this land since as a family member, since the late 1800s. But Millridge itself was started by my grandmother in 1962. We're a commercial boarding operation, so I know that this is a real estate podcast, but I want to at least level set on some thoroughbred background. I might be the first thoroughbred person to be on the podcast, so I want to share a little bit of that. But what we do is we raise horses from conception through high school graduation. When they leave us, they're taught how to be ridden. They go to the college where they're taught how to be ridden, and they go to the pros where they compete at the racetrack. And then after their competitive years are done, they'll come back and either join the breeding stock or they'll be retrained for a second career. So we have about 120 mares on the farm, and we own about 15 of them. The rest are owned by clients who pay us, to take care of them each day. So my main job is around the farm in Millridge, which involves client relations and et cetera, making sure that the team of 45 are all taken care of and their needs. And then my job is oftentimes, to try and set the vision with my family and then execute towards that. Millridge is located, Man o' War, when it came through, cut part of Millridge just a little bit. Interestingly, my great-grandfather's farm, Beaumont Farm, was cut by New Circle Road. And so this Millridge was the furthest piece of the farm, of Beaumont Farm, away from the city. And my grandmother was the most keen to be raising horses, and that's how we came with this parcel to run. It's called Mill Ridge because it's the ridgeland above the Bowman Mill Road. It's a tremendous privilege to work with my family and to work with the horses we've had the opportunity to work with. One more final plug on the thoroughbreds, but when a thoroughbred is born, it has less than a 1% chance of winning a Grade 1 race. So like the Bluegrass Stakes, the Kentucky Derby, the Maker's Mark Mile are all Grade 1s. Horses from Millridge are striking at like a 3% clip. And so that'd be if you want to play in the NBA, you go to the University of Kentucky. If you want to win Grade 1 races, you start at Millridge Farm. So that's our plug.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Logistical. Well, one, thank you for saying that. I think there's a great integration between you being on a horse farm and real estate podcast, and we can get more into that. But I think just because horse racing and horses are such a fabric, just an integral fabric of Lexington. I love that you're coming on DevelopLex. You also have a ton of real estate experience in general. Again, we'll get into that through the interview, but super vital to talk about Millridge, I'd say. Actual operationally and what you all are doing day to day here. What are you doing at Millridge?
So we are nurturing horses through their various life cycles. So right now is early in the year, and so it's the breeding and foaling season. So we just had a foal born, 20 minutes ago now. So we'll go see it before y'all depart, get some B-roll around it. So right now, I mean, thoroughbred business is about selling dreams, and it's really the business of dreams. The beautiful part about our business is that it can't be bought. Sheikh Mohammed, who owns Godolphin, Darley, has, he has 20,000 acres of horse pasture land around the world. Someone might correct me, and it might be 100,000 acres. I mean, he has a massive operation from Australia, Ireland, Dubai, North America. Hasn't won the Kentucky Derby. Now this year he's got a really good chance, but he hasn't won it yet. So, and he has spent billions of dollars on horses. And two self-described dumbasses formed the Dumbass Partnership and nearly won the Triple Crown with California Chrome. And that's like the great dream of this business. And so what we do is we try and facilitate and nurture within our role for our clients. So our clients, whether they have mares that they want to breed to race, and then we're going to raise that horse with the intention of going to the racetrack, or whether they want to breed to sell at either Keeneland September, Phasig October, up in Saratoga. Our crop we take to market most often is a yearling, which is a horse that's 18 months old, right before it's been taught how to be ridden. So we have some clients who want to breed to sell, and we'll help nurture that foal from conception through up to the sale process. Gotcha. And then at that point, we're trying to put forward a product that is athletic, and so that someone who wants to buy that horse can see that, this is going to fulfill the dream that they have in wanting to buy that horse. So we're in the business of selling dreams.
Important that you said your windows of time as well, because we've wanted to get this interview on the books for quite a while. But if you know Price, you know that in 3-week increments at any time of the year, he essentially goes underground.
Yes.
Because he is, I assume, all over, but definitely at Keeneland.
Mm-hmm. Definitely at Keeneland. And it's so the first half of the year is the breeding and foaling, and then the second half is all the sales, which is an amazing, it's open to the public, and I find it so vital to share horses with people, and I love sharing horses with people because I think that it is such a privilege to have horses in our backyard and also to be around them. And if we want the thoroughbred business to go on for future generations, more people need to touch horses, in my opinion. And we can jump into that on some of we started this nonprofit Horse Country, but to kind of demonstrate a little bit, my grandmother's born in 1926. She was found at 3 years old sleeping in a stall with a horse. My dad is born in 1954, loves horses, but he can tell you every car his friends drove at 16. I'm born in 1982, and me and my cousin, Gatewood, there were more of us, but we started working on the farm at 12, but we were the only ones who went to work that early and worked on a farm. And now our son is born in 2015, and he likes horses, he likes being outside, but he can tell you a lot about Minecraft and a lot about the netherworld. And so in my lifetime of people I've known, from my grandmother to my son, horses have gone from in everyone's backyard to now just existing in a video game, which is great. I have nothing against Minecraft, but there's something that is so real in a human and horse connection that I feel privileged to be able to do every day, and also to be able to share with other people, because I think that in our community, having thoroughbreds is a great blessing, but it only works if it's meaningful to that person in our community.
So before thoroughbreds, walk us through college to early career.
Sure.
How you ended up here.
So grew up in Lexington. I went to the Lexington school until 5th grade, and then I was an LTMS Black Cat in 6th through 8th grade.
And Lexington school connection is an interesting, wasn't that?
Right. So the Lexington school, my dad also went to Lexington school in the early years, and it was on land that Hal Price Headley, our great-grandfather, gave to form the school. So if you can imagine Beaumont Farm, and the city of Lexington that my grandmother grew up on, she grew up where Sullivan College is. So there on Harrisburg Road, there's still a stone wall around Sullivan College that was where her house was. Mm-hmm. And the farm stretched from that house to here, which is the crow flies, is like 3 or 4 miles, in bits and pieces, but it was pretty contiguous. And so actually, so my dad was born in Houston. He's the youngest. As an aside, but I think it's pointed. So in 1959, my grandmother's like, I'm moving the family back to Kentucky. I'm starting this farm with my dad. So family moves to Kentucky in 1960, and shortly thereafter, they start the farm in 62, and my dad and his siblings are all going to the Lexington school. Well, they landed here at Mill Ridge, and across Bowman Mill Road was John Abel Farm, where their first cousins were. And neither had ever met each other, which is crazy to think about in 1959. And now they're now 8 kids, all within the same age, living in the country. And my Uncle Reynolds and I guess my cousin Jimmy, who were just a little bit older than my dad, would ride horses from here, Mill Ridge, to the Beaumont shop, which is where the Beaumont post office is. And it was 3 miles. And they would leave their horse there. They would walk over New Circle Road, which is at the top of Georgian Way, and they would walk to the Lexington school, is how they got to and from school, which is crazy to think about, again, in a lifetime of how a city has changed. You know, I mean, that's not so long ago. And Jimmy and Reynolds both are still, you know, very active and have these like very real memories of what life was like back then.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool.
I know there's something nostalgic and beautiful about it, but also, you know, yeah, it's really hard to imagine. So
Yeah, absolutely.
So how I got there. So then I thought,
Black Cat.
oh yeah, LTMS Black Cat, which is an amazing experience, amazing school. Both my parents had gone to boarding school, and so I thought everyone went to boarding school. So I went to boarding school in Connecticut, which was great. I went to Taft, and I was at a stage in my life where it flipped my parents from being my like enforcement to my mentors. And so I remember, you know, at 13, 14 years old, taking a train to New York City, meeting my aunt, coming into Grand Central and being like, wow, and calling my parents and being like, you know how much grass is in Central Park? Can you believe it? You know, again, just like these like really amazing moments. So went to school in Connecticut and then went to Vanderbilt in Nashville. Was dating a girl who was investment banking, a year older than me, so I moved to Charlotte, and I met a guy in Charlotte. And again, up until that point, I'd spent all my summers working on farms and working horses and thought that I would just jump right back into thoroughbreds. This girl and the opportunity to move to Charlotte was great. And I met a guy who was said that I could be the CEO of a $35 million business, and he'd evaluate me on my ability to increase its value, which was really attractive way of office property management. And so, so if you're ever trying to recruit a property manager, that's how you need to frame it.
That is a really good pitch.
Right? It was great. But I loved it. You know, I mean, I was 23. I had way more responsibility than I deserved, and I enjoyed people. I enjoyed learning stories, and I enjoyed positioning this asset. So this was Parkway Properties was a REIT that was based in Jackson, Mississippi, and they owned office space across the Southeast. And so I got into their job training program. We were selling not Beaumont-style office space, but the somewhat equivalent in Charlotte, kind of old Koger product that Koger had developed a lot of the Southeast. And so it was right in between Ballantyne, which was like the up-and-coming neighborhood of Charlotte, and downtown Charlotte. So I was able to position it with like great service, you know, $5 or $6 less foot in rent, and it was fun. We had a leasing challenge, and the guy who I worked for is a guy named Jason Lipsey. His father, Michael Lipsey, is like the CCIM main broker trainer.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
He's come and spoken at like 4 conferences that I've been
Really?
at in the last few years. Yeah.
Oh, he's a great guy. And so his son was my first boss, which was like just total happenstance. And he's still a friend, Jason. He's just been a great role model and mentor. And he went back to business school, and there was an opportunity to move back to Nashville where there was a downtown office building that needed support. And like, I'm a big neighborhood believer. I'm a big believer in downtowns from my experience growing up here, where, you know, I was here as Palomar and Beaumont, and everything got developed, right? And so and my grandmother's land use strategy was don't come out here. You know, like in my childhood was the bumper sticker wars, right? Like growth is good, growth destroys bluegrass forever, soil. I still have some soil stickers if you want to put them in the DevelopLex archive. But that was how we grew up. And so it always felt to me like, I don't know how long that will last, one, but it's not about don't come out here. It's about creating better alternatives somewhere else. And so I got really involved in downtown Nashville's development community, and was given, because we had, so at that time, Nashville had just was on its first renewal of its business improvement district. It had a 5-year run. This was coming to the second 5 years, and we were going to push it to a 10-year. The building I managed had a good tax base, so I ended up carrying a bigger checkbook than I probably deserved, and I was really keen. And so I ended up getting a lot more responsibility in some of the nonprofits in Nashville around their downtown development, which was great. But at that time, this was '07, and there were less than 1,000 people living in downtown Nashville.
Wow.
SVN Stone Commercial Real Estate is a full-service commercial real estate firm located in Lexington, Kentucky. Affiliated with the SVN International Network, SVN has over 200 offices across the globe. The SVN Stone team consists of experienced commercial real estate advisors in the heart of the Bluegrass. SVN helps their clients with commercial property sales, leasing, investments, and property management. Let SVN help you with your commercial real estate needs. Check us out at svnstone.com.
So, I mean, just how quickly Nashville's changed. That was '07. And then went back and got my business degree, and then the opportunity, I'd kind of run a little bit of my race in Nashville. Is either I'm going to commit to this or I'm going to look for something else. I was with I'd moved from that REIT to a small adaptive reuse developer who had an amazing project. And when I started, we were going to buy more projects like it. Cummins Station, which is like on the inside of the Gulch. And we were going to buy more projects like Cummins Station across the Southeast. I was like, this is going to be amazing. I'll come back into horses as an owner, having, made all this money in real estate. It's going to be great. And then '08 happens, and I ended up just chasing a carrot that was never going to come to be. So as I was finishing my MBA, I was considering a total career shift and moving to GE, had a leadership development program where you traveled around the world. And so I was like a finalist for that. And then my dad approached me about coming back to work in the family business. So I came back in December of 2010.
Man, what a turbulent few years from having this vision of moving across the Southeast and developing these, I guess, infill projects in very large metros. And then all of a sudden that being all changed. What were kind of your feelings behind at that point coming back to Lexington? Or did you feel excited about it? Did you feel a little bit remiss?
It's a great question. I felt encouraged and excited because I mean, I obviously always loved Lexington. Was always, came back a lot. I was always very proud of Lexington. Griff Van Meter's a friend I grew up with, friend of the pod, and Griff was at that time starting to mess around in some downtown projects, and so I felt like there was an opportunity to kind of take some things that I'd been involved in Nashville and understand better in Lexington. So it was great. And when I got back, Griff was like, I just met with Mayor Gray, and he said that there's all this, national grant dollars out there, and no one's going after it. We should go after it. I'm like, okay, great, let's do that. So we, formed the No Lie CDC, and then Richard Young came on, who was an amazing, grant writer, and all of a sudden we had some national dollars to try and help Creative Place make the North Side neighborhood, which was a fascinating and wonderful experience. So I was able to, because I was working with my family, I was able to have some flexibility to pursue projects, not just you got to earn this amount of money tomorrow. I had some flexibility, which is a great blessing.
Yeah.
So cast that vision of the Nashville that people think of today is not what Nashville was when you were there. Mm-hmm. The North Lime that people think of today was not the North Lime that you saw potential for. Mm-hmm. What was that original vision of what's that going to look like?
Sure. So try and parallel, although what Nashville has done is, amazing. So Nashville's success, even when I was in undergrad there, so I went to college in 2000. So the mayor of Nashville in the late 90s was Phil Bredesen, who then became governor of Tennessee. So Phil Bredesen had made money in the healthcare space, and he was truly a public servant. And he said in his vision for Nashville, it's we are going to focus on downtown. And so he did everything he could. And during his 8-year tenure, they had a brand new public library, which is gorgeous. They built the Bell South, or the Batman building. They did the Titans. They got the Predators. They cleaned up Lower Broadway because before that it had been a very kind of sketchy kind of place, for lack of a better word. And then that was I would say on the surface. And then they work with the chamber. They spin out from the chamber this the Nashville Downtown Partnership, and so that was what was funded by the Business Improvement District, and that was what I really got active in. And so the chamber's role was to similarly respond to relocation requests, et cetera. But then the Downtown Partnership and the chamber got a lot more tactical than. Which was, I think, a great driver in their success. So you had Bredesen, you had a couple years with Bill Purcell, who was great, but he didn't really kind of leave his mark. And then you come to Carl Dean, who was probably the most, under his tenure, was the biggest change of Nashville. And Dean had, I was thinking about it the other day, he had three things. We're going to build a great city because we're going to have great education, public safety, and economic development. That was it. And if you met Carl, and Carl was an underdog. I think he was a public defender beforehand, and so he wasn't really the person that everyone thought was going to be the mayor. And so he pounded the pavement, and he inspired people, and he became an incredible mayor. So then when Carl Dean was there, his economic development strategy was working with the chamber and the Downtown Partnership for downtown specific users, but they would go outbound. So like there was an empty building downtown it's called L&C Tower, and this was like 9,000 square foot floor plates, like one of the first skyscrapers, cool old Art Deco building, but like very impractical for today's standard, right? No one wants a 9,000 foot floor plate. At that time, if you were less than 15, they were inefficient for the footprints that office needed. So they set up to go and find places and users in big cities that had that they could pull out. So they identified Service Source. So Service Source was basically a sales company that did subscriptions to Sage Intact products, and these companies would give it to Service Source to then have them dial for dollars. And they were headquartered in San Francisco, and they were started in San Francisco, which makes sense, right? But they looked at, you can figure out how much they were paying in rent in San Francisco. They were paying like $90 a foot for like 100,000 square feet. So one example is the Nashville Chamber and Downtown Partnership and Mayor's office were like, let's go to San Francisco. We're going to call on them. And so they all show up to Service Source's corporate headquarters. So that's the mayor, that's the whole. He's like, we love what you do. We think that Nashville should be considered for your expansions because we've got 7 universities within like this amount of time, et cetera. It wasn't just, hey, it's Music City, but it was the Nashville Music City brand was a calling card. It kind of like people knew what it was. It wasn't just in Timbuktu, but then they had that type of like civic and corporate leadership going to say, hey, will you come and visit us? And that was it. And then Service Source got on the plane months later and came to visit. They toured around the market, and then they had dinner at Carl Dean's house, and they had these singer-songwriters perform for them. And then before you knew it, they took down 6 floors of the L&C Tower, which was like a great savings for them. I mean, I think it was like $14.50 a foot, and built to suit. Unbelievable, right? But what we didn't realize at the time was that, and this was a competing building to my building, but at that time I didn't have the vacancy that I could have accommodated. Like in our downtown team, they needed the help. And so everybody's on board to make sure that, whatever we can do to help, get more users downtown. But they ended up being a density of, I think, 6 people per 1,000 square feet. And so they were hiring dozens of college grads every year, just funneling them in, right? And those college grads went to lunch downtown, and they went to the bars afterwards. And so now all of the ecosystem of downtown was greatly benefited from that strategy. And it was I use that as an example of like what I thought was really inspiring from Nashville in those times to answer what it was like when I started to when I left. When I came here, the North Limestone corridor was, again, we've always struggled with like approachable housing. Yes, there's affordable housing needs. There's also like starter home needs, and there's just like arguably even like just safe housing needs. And there was a lot of portfolios of housing on the north side that were controlled by a few families who had run them and managed them for a long period of time, and they were passing away. And so those portfolios were starting to come available, and they had bought a lot of them at various places. And we started shopping the Master Commissioner sale and just trying to consolidate product. And we have owned it for now nearly 15 years. We have not taken a distribution. We haven't made any money on it, because it just takes a long time, and it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot to try and do it right, I guess. And so anyway, so that was kind of the idea in investing both on the nonprofit side. The pitch was on York Street and Eddy Street, there were like 40 houses that were kind of available. And so we tried to make an affordable housing home ownership program. That was the grant that we originally got. And then to Richard's credit, we got a number of different other grants, like an NEA grant that allows us to do a study on what the neighborhood wanted and trying to be sensitive to that. And then we started a for-profit ownership entity because on North Limestone, at some point in time, you could walk down to, I guess, 200 Main Street or whatever, Lexington's office is, and become a B1 property. And so if you're on North Limestone, you could become B1. And we didn't want, I guess what I'd say, predatory commercial users to come into this neighborhood that we were trying to create an affordable home ownership program. Like there were enough check and goes, there were enough like liquor stores already, and like we didn't want something to, do that. So we bought some of the B1 and then ended up buying an apartment complex up there, and it's been great. I've learned a ton through it and enjoyed it. And I don't know, relative to vision, I think was maybe the question, and like how I was thinking about traveling around the Southeast to the North Limestone. I think what has always been beautiful about Lexington is its neighborhoods, and it feels like, and still to this day, the North Side neighborhood is a great neighborhood. Like from Castlewood Park to Duncan Park to, the elementary schools that are sprinkled throughout there. Like it's laid out like a really lovely, wonderful neighborhood that had just been disinvested in, I think, both from private dollars, public dollars, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so it felt like if I was going to try and, alleviate pressure on the farm of growth, is like, how do we continue to invest in these great neighborhoods that Lexington has, and how can we make sure that we invest and make them as good as they can be before we consider, cutting in, the green space around the surrounding area.
Talking about investment, just shaking the tree seemed to be a theme of, hey, Jim Gray says there's federal dollars out there that you can go after. Now there's local dollars out there for ways to invest into the properties. Tell us about one of
Sure.
the ways that you did that.
Right. So shortly thereafter, good segue. Because again, my hope is through this is to be available if your listeners or anybody hears something that they'd like to learn more about. I'm certainly open, and mentors were a big part of my life, and I enjoy trying to help others too. So to your question, the EPA consent decree came in right around the same time. We all started then paying sewer tax. I think the NOLI CDC ended up doing a study through Lewis Johnson, who's now at Gresham Smith, who's a phenomenal partner, on the stormwater in this area, because basically part of our consent decree dollars go into private grants. And so this was like, oh, wow. So the CDC did a study of the North Limestone area, North End neighborhood, and it had a bunch of opportunity for stormwater grants. And so we bought at a master commissioner. So the CDC bought the North Pole Garden, which is if you go north on Limestone, past Gray Line on the left, right, bordering, because it was a big kind of like sinkhole, or there's like a natural spring there, and there was always water. So there was condemned houses there. The CDC got that and made a North Pole Garden with seed leaf. Across the street, the 912 through 918 North Limestone, we're at Master Commissioner, and so we bought those from Master Commissioner and spent $50,000 on them. I mean, after we bought them, the crossing guard said to the guy who was helping us redo them, said, thank you so much, because there's a brothel in the second story of the one closest to the school. And it was like, it's a high pedestrian traffic area. And so she was like, I struggle to explain to kids who's coming out of these houses, in the middle of the day. So that was just gives an example of kind of the condition. And again, I don't know who owned them before, but I know that they hadn't been paying their taxes. So we were able to buy them and Master Commissioner, and we redid them, and you put the money into the inside. I mean, you're totally redoing them. And then there's not a way to, there's just, you value engineer the outside. But because of the stormwater grant program, the city it's in two buckets. The first bucket is like soft cost study bucket. And so you put up 20% of that, and the cap on that is $36,000. So you put up, $7,200, and you can study it. And then with that study, which is really pretty and dreamy, you do the second grant, which is another year. I mean, it takes a while, but then with that, you can put up, the city will give you, I think, $360,000. So basically from our calculus, it was like, all right, we put up $7,000 to maybe win ultimately 360, and then we can totally change the exterior of the space. And it also changes the stormwater. I mean, it is for stormwater, but we were inspired by the Good Foods Co-op, got a big grant. So how pretty the Good Foods Co-op parking lot is, it was like, why don't we do more of that? And it turns out, so the 912 through 918 is 10 units, and we got a stormwater grant, and it won the American Society of Landscape Architecture's highest national award 2 years ago, which is awesome. And it was like a life goal for Aaron Hathaway, who works with Lewis Johnson and Gresham, to win this level of an award because, which, I mean, how amazing is that? Like, Aaron's like life goal was to win an ASLA national award. And here was a project that we would never have done had it not been for the grant dollars and that little carrot. And I thought what was so great about the program is that you put a little bit in to go for a lot, and you have to take time, but like putting up 7 to gamble to get 400 down the road. Now you got to put up 72 down the road, but at least you're putting that 72 up once you know that you got a shot.
Craftsman Contractors is Central Kentucky's one-stop shop for roofing, windows, siding, and gutters. CraftsmanContractors.com/contact us will get you straight to the form you need so that their team will get in touch about your project. Or just text Stephen at 859-246-0108. When they finish your project of windows, siding, gutters, or roofing, you'll see what they mean when they say we build with integrity.
Yeah. I guess I'd love to touch on I think there are programs like that are maybe still out there that exist that are great. I assume that program is still out there as well. There are different ways. I mean, you've seen it in a lot of the places that you've lived. There are different ways to incentivize developers and real estate owners and people to go to certain areas and to invest in certain areas. I would love to direct the question to Lexington today of, do you feel, maybe after having seen some other cities, do you feel like we as a city are doing things in a correct way to actually incentivize investment in our city? I know that we do some things well, but I'd love to kind of touch on, having some understanding of how other cities operate and are doing well, how Lexington kind of stacks up.
I think
Loaded question, by the way.
I guess a prevailing feeling I have on Lexington is that so many of us want it to be great, and like we see all this potential, and sometimes we get frustrated because it's like, we have all this potential to unlock, and yet it's not being unlocked for whatever reason, and whether that's, any number of reasons. So I think that take this program, right? So this is a stormwater program that is run by the Stormwater Division, right? Well, we have an affordable housing problem, right? And so affordable housing is really hard, right? I mean, especially if you're going to make all the dollars and cents go, you end up having to get federal dollars, which means you've got to hire consultants to study the federal program and to see if you qualify, and you build senior affordable, gets the most points today. So if you want to get the most money, you got to build senior affordable, et cetera. So it's because it's so hard, people don't do it, right? And I think in our community, there are a lot of people who either have zero basis in land or inherited land or can sit on land because they have another business that they don't need to turn that land into money. And we keep our property taxes low so that they don't have to turn the land into money. And so I feel like we can be more creative, whether we don't even have to look at what Nashville did or Charlotte. We can even look at ourselves and say, wow, we have all this money in Affordable Housing Trust Fund. What if we set up the affordable housing like we have the stormwater grants, where owners of property put a little bit of skin in the game, but we could grant money to study the affordable housing. Like, is this 2-acre parcel downtown a viable affordable housing project? I don't know, but I'll put up, I know that it would cost me $50,000 to study, and $50,000 is a lot more than I would want to put up for this is, I guess, pertinent to us because we have a 2-acre site on the north side that want to do a project on, and it's cost prohibitive to even get started. Mm-hmm. But here I look at the stormwater program. I'm like, I put up 7 or 10 to get matched to then do a study to see if it's viable. Because then once I know it's viable, then I'll find the next development partner to then build something. Yeah. But at the moment, I don't know. I mean, I'm also I'm guilty of the same thing. We don't have to do anything on the land; it can just sit there. And then we kick the can further because we still have an affordable housing problem, and we still don't have to, do anything. So I think that's one kind of challenge at times. I think we kind of like maybe, I don't know, we overthink things. We don't try and like be proud of like the stormwater program is something I think we should be really proud of, and maybe look at other government, opportunities to emulate the same thing and be confident that it works, right? Because the stormwater works, so we should be confident that another program like it would work. If that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think a fascinating thing, I know you said you didn't want to relate it to Nashville, but we have all of the same tools that Nashville had when you were talking about the government that said, hey, y'all, this is what we're going to do with downtown. And then you had quasi or the Downtown Districts Association saying, this is what we're going to do. And then you were a competing representative for a property that was a cheerleader for another one. That's a fascinating thing that when you have somebody that casts a vision so clearly that it's kind of like the parent that says, you kids get along.
Right.
I think that's fascinating that's kind of what these, when you think about the programs that make communities, that's when you can't figure it out within the sewer and you have the EPA come in here and say, hey, yeah, y'all are going to be under oversight for the next 10 years. But then there's that support, and y'all get along with this, figure it out.
Right. And then now we've invested in the sewer program, projects, so we can grow our density and our infrastructure because we're not putting, poo into the streams as much anymore. Yep. But I think it's a great point as well. And another kind of parallel is Nashville, Davidson County, like we also, I'd argue, are in a stronger position than Nashville. In many respects, the merged government, Davidson County is merged with Nashville, so the same, except they have a 42-member city council, which is
It's a lot of voices.
It's a lot of voices and because of how they had to merge it and the compromise. They also compete very tooth and nail with Williamson County, which is just south, which Williamson County is Franklin, Brentwood, Cool Springs, which has great public schools. And so we were oftentimes competing against Williamson County when people would be like, oh, move to Williamson County, get Nashville. But, you live in Williamson County and you have all the space. But even then, Williamson County just landed Nissan. Nissan opened their corporate headquarters out of Long Beach in early 2000s, maybe 05, 06. And the project that I worked on ended up signing a 30,000 square foot lease with TBWA Chiat Day, which is like the biggest, they do like Apple's marketing, and they did Nissan's marketing. And I didn't appreciate at the time, I was like, man, I can't believe Nissan's going to Williamson County. But then here was this like huge credit tenant that and they had, our lease payment was so low, they spent a fortune on tenant improvements, and to the point where they actually hung a Nissan car on the ceiling of their conference room, which was so awesome. And then we used to photograph in all of our content to create this like really modern hip space. And there's water running through part of the basement, but in their space, it was beautiful. And so we were able to leverage as far as rising, everybody benefits. If you'd said, man, Nissan moving to Williamson County, I'd have said, man, it's terrible. And then a year later, I'm working for this building that has this huge credit tenant that is awesome and bringing incredibly talented people in. And I'm using their space as collateral to sell other space and dream about what it could be. That's all. So it ends up very much. And I think to your point, we do a lot of I don't know, it's not a zero-sum game, we can all benefit from the growth of each other, so.
Yeah, it legitimizes, absolutely legitimizes exactly what you just said. It's just a rising tide lifts all ships. It helped everybody. And same thing when you were competing on properties in Charlotte or also in Nashville. It's just because you guys lost out on a 6'4" tenant at 9,000, 54,000 square foot tenant,
right.
that brings a lot of commerce to the area. It helps everybody.
Absolutely. And that space is I'm not competing with that space later. So now the 20,000 square feet I have to market might have a little bit of a bump because there's now 54 out of the market.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And I think at times we can be really short-sighted in our community.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know that we compromise well enough. This is a good example of compromise, right? I didn't get the 54,000 square foot tenant, but that's okay because I'm going to get another one down the road. Like sometimes I feel like we're too binary.
Well, and that's fascinating because talking about merged government, we have a merged government that is nonpartisan, that was really designed to be a way that there was not the your camp versus my camp, so that compromise was there.
Right.
And it's almost like we've created our own divide for fun.
Right.
I'll say too, just talking on that and maybe some challenges, and then thinking forward. We're obviously in a weird season as we sit here. Ross and I just spoke at the CommerceLex regional summit. And so we're really thinking through this idea of regionalism, which
Right.
is kind of in theory what Nashville could have benefited or does benefit from, of thinking more than just, when people say Nashville at this point, they're almost a Murfreesboro. Like
Right.
it's like,
Absolutely.
it's crazy. I'll see deals pop up on my radar that say Nashville, and it's like an hour and a half outside of
Right.
Nashville. My parents or my aunt and uncle live in Columbia, and they would almost consider themselves
Right.
Nashville.
Right.
Rant aside, I think we're in this really interesting season where there are ways forward in Lexington, and you just said something that I think was noteworthy of. We actually do have an advantage through our government structure to be able to have a path forward towards legitimizing Lexington and bringing more commerce, and all while being under the Lexington identity, not trying to be a Nashville, not trying to be a Charlotte. Are there any other characteristics of Lexington that you feel like people that, are listening to this program in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s that are really trying to think forward in Lexington? What can we really be pitching as a city to try to lift our city?
Right. I think we're an amazingly approachable place, and I appreciate that it can seem like there aren't ways to meet people, but I do think that like your city council members are typically an email or a call away. Like I've always found that if you raise your hand and want to engage, people will, call on you or open the door. Now I also find at times that people can be like, oh, we've tried that, or we've tried it this way, it won't work, and I think that there comes some compromise on those in power to be like, okay, let's try it again. Timing can be everything. We started this nonprofit Horse Country to make it easier for farms to give tours, and that when we first started talking about it, oftentimes I heard, oh, we tried that, or oh, it won't work, or we looked at it and we couldn't get this or couldn't get that, and it took. Our timing was better, and I think at times those in power, hopefully, and if I'm in power or anything like that, I think, you have to also consider like, it's okay, let's try. We should still encourage, maybe they'll fail, maybe I failed and they'll get it done. And I think that is something that I think other communities, and certainly Nashville had when I was there. I don't know if it still does because it's like, exponentially bigger. But I do generally feel that way. I also think that, what is the future economy? I think Lexington is super competitive to what I see as a future economy relative to remote work, relative to really choosing where you want to live. I use my brother-in-law as an example. He works for a consulting firm out of New York, but while he's in Lexington, he's paying Fayette County payroll taxes, and it might be 75% of the time, but that's a significant six-figure salary that is choosing to be here, that trying to recruit his whole firm would be impossible. But recruiting him, now he's married to my sister and they love Lexington. They grew up in Lexington, and that's great. But, I think that we can recruit more people like him that can choose really where they want to live. We have a great airport, and I know we don't have direct everywhere, but, by being able to jump into Atlanta to Tokyo, when I flew to Japan, it blew me away that I was like one stop and I'm in Japan, which is like the most foreign experience, And so I think we have a really good airport, relative to our size. I think that we, if I were, on my soapbox, I think our bike ped, opportunity is huge. If you ever look at the bike ped master plan, it is so incredible. And if we just had the political will to be like, we're going to do this, and it's not going to cost $1 bajillion. Like, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it right, and that's what we're going to do. It could then, with pedal assist e-bikes, you can be anywhere, safely. There's actually, and this wasn't my idea, but I think it's worth noting, especially to your audience. There is a rail line when you leave Town Branch Park and you drive out Manchester. So I'm driving out of town on Manchester. I go over a rail line and I go under a rail line. The rail line you go over is a Corman line, and it runs all the way to Wild Turkey Distillery. And it's basically been abandoned because it's too narrow. And so it could be a great rail trail. And so it goes right through the heart of Versailles, right through the heart of Lawrenceburg, and ends at Wild Turkey. So what kind of an amazing statement and what way to get visitors plus humans in Lexington in and out of downtown than along that type of a dedicated path. So I think like if we were, to take let's go after a big vision, and I think we have the people, and we recruit the people naturally to our community. Like we have this natural draw because of what a great place it is. I mean, it starts with our great neighborhoods, but I think we need to really invest in them going forward.
DevelopLex is also sponsored by Community Trust Bank. Hi there, this is Cam Dacey, Commercial Loan Officer at Community Trust Bank and avid DevelopLex and Middle Tech podcast listener. Community Trust offers a wide variety of home loans, commercial loans, and small business loans to suit your financial needs, as well as mobile banking, internet banking, and bill pay. Their friendly and professional staff would love to assist you at one of their 6 Lexington locations. Community Trust Bank is committed to building communities built on trust. Member FDIC, equal housing lender, subject to credit approval.
And what's interesting is that so just as there was the study phase of the water work, we have studied so much, and the councilmen and women that say, "Oh yeah, we've looked at that." It's a beautiful graveyard of old PDFs that have the watercolor vision of downtown. When you say, when was the last time we had a downtown master plan? More than 10 years ago. Right. But it's fascinating to see what somebody dreamed of that got put on a shelf.
Right.
Because you didn't have community leadership, or you didn't have that strong enough vision that everybody stopped at the infighting because they saw this grander dream.
Right.
And
that's, I think, and I also feel at times that, I feel strongly that a lot of people who are, power brokers in town, assumed the role in the late 90s, early 2000s. And they've led our community masterfully, but I think that there's also over the next decade, a really big opportunity to continue to revisit visions that might have gotten tired, or revisit, there's a leadership need and civic engagement opportunity, I think, really over the next 5 to 10 years that may be a renaissance we haven't seen in some time. So I'd encourage everybody to get involved and try and set the vision that we want, as a community, because I think that our Venn diagrams overlap a lot more than they don't.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I'm either going to look back in 30 years and think I'm either going to be right or wrong. I'm
another option?
Dead, I think is the other option. I'm always curious as to if people are having the same conversations that we are today 30 years ago, or if we truly are. I do
talk
know
about the bumper sticker wars. Absolutely, they were. Right?
Yeah.
Or the bank wanted for security meetings.
Oh, the conference room at the top that everybody talks about,
right? That everybody talks about. I mean, that was the same time 30 years ago, right?
Yeah. And so I'm curious now. I do feel I think that it's different, and this is why I think that one between business ownership and the massive what do we call the massive exodus of small business over the next few years.
All the retirements of all the small business owners.
Yeah, there's a term, I can't remember what it is.
The tsunami.
Bomber, something like that.
Yeah.
Silver tsunami. Yeah.
Silver tsunami. Oh, nice.
Yeah. Nice, Ross. I think between things like that, small business ownership, but I also would 100% agree with you that there is a transfer of power is not the right word, but there is a transfer of maybe a fiduciary responsibility to the city going on over the next 10 years that maybe I'm ignorant because I've only been in, business for 7-ish years now. But I think that from a lot of the conversations that I've had over the last 4 years since we've been doing DevelopLex, that there really is this massive opportunity, not just for quote unquote the development of Lexington, but actually how we're having conversations civically, I think is something that you just mentioned, and politically, and also as that relates to what is our population going to look like in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. I think that there's a real opportunity right now And we're kind of at this, like, I mean, we've talked about it offline before, Ross, but a tipping point in Lexington that we're either probably, maybe I'm wrong, but I think we're going to either go really positive or really negative. But fortunately, we have the ability to have conversations like this with people that we care about that can influence that. And to your point, Lexington is a city that you truly can make one call, maybe 1.5 to 2 calls, and make a difference.
Absolutely.
100%.
One call and a 3-way.
One call and a 3-way. Ross will
Merged in.
we'll just be having a conversation. He'll just patch me in.
That's great.
I love it.
He gets stuff done. You're fairly involved. I feel like you know a lot more people than I ever expected you to know, and you reference people that I don't know often, not in a bad way, but I think maybe you think that I know more people than I do. How have you structured your life in order to, if you were to try to inspire the next generation of listener that wants to get involved, whether that's from a real estate perspective or a political perspective or whatever it might be, how would you coach them in like, I'm not involved at all. I own a duplex. I'm listening to this show because I want to invest in real estate, but I want to get to know more people. What would you tell them besides reach out to me?
Yeah. No, I think, well, I mean, frankly, and this is not an intended plug, but I think the culture and community that you're creating around DevelopLex, whether it's from your newsletter, whether it's from your live events, like the 2 live events I've attended, I've met really interesting people that I think at times we can think that Lexington's really small, and then it takes going to one of your live events and realizing, wow, I only know like 10 of the 100 people here, you know? I spoke at a young professionals group of like Lexington, was asked to talk about horses and horse racing, and I met a lot of people that I wouldn't have known otherwise. So I think that, you know, there are lots of ways in like following your general curiosities, you know, I think will lead you to more than I would have thought, I guess, if that makes sense. You know, I love the Lex Today newsletter. I mean, it's fun. I mean, I think at times like we can just take for granted a lot of things in our community, you know, because it's pretty easy, you know, it's safe and it's nice and it's clean, and we've got a lot of things that make our community pretty easy. And so you don't have to necessarily get involved. But I met a guy through our children over the weekend, and his family owned Azure restaurant, and I had no idea that Azure had a book club. And that was like one of the things that like they're trying to figure out what to do on this. I was like, wow, like that is awesome. You know, I mean, like we're so, and his father was a former professor. And so I think that, you know, if I had one gripe, it would be like, we have such a privilege of having the University of Kentucky in Transylvania, and they bring such incredible scholars, whether it's to their business school, the law school, the architecture school. I wish I knew where more of those were. You know, like I would love to be able to participate more in the college town gown experience. And that would be one like improvement area. But I think in general, to answer your question, how do you get more involved? I think that I just got on Reddit, and who knew what a great, vibrant community that is. But like, you know, there are like lots of things that you start to see that people are involved in. And I guess maybe at a time I'd say, Lexington, why would you go to the Lexington Ballet? You know, they don't even, who would do that? They don't even have a place that they go and perform all the time. I went over the weekend. It was unbelievable. Really? It was so engaging. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I think my attitude before had been like, Lexington doesn't have it. If I'm going to go to the ballet, it'd have to be New York, let's say. And I showed up at the Lexington Ballet. It was magical. And so now Beth wants to go to my wife's name's Beth. We're going to the Philharmonic this weekend, taking our kids. And again, like, wouldn't have ever thought I would do that before, but it's, again, just trying to put yourself out there a little bit. And so far, at least, I've always found tremendous reward in putting myself out there and experiencing something.
Yeah. So. And I think what's cool about that is now you have been, and now you're championing that experience. And so hopefully if we can all engage in a more tactful way of championing the things that we enjoy about the city and the people that we enjoy, and like, hey, you should connect. Like before we started talking, actually with mics in front of our face, you just rattled off 3 people that like we need to connect with. And I think that and kudos to you. I think that that's something that you do really well, and people that are plugged in civically do really well, that I've experienced is like, you would like him. You guys should connect. I'm going to put you in a 3-way text. You know,
Well, thank you.
That kind of thing's cool to me.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I think that's a great part of our community because back, when I was coming up in my early days of my career, that was how, it came to be. And when you, at various stages of your career, I feel like you always give a lot of time to people who want to engage. Very rare. I've never had someone reached out to and them not be back in touch or over a period of time. Really because we all care, right? If you're interested in learning about horses, I'll give you all the time because I'm passionate about it. If you're interested about land use or about like design, like I'm really interested in these things. I love to talk about it, and you might know someone at the architecture school that I should go, see and meet up with and understand what they're doing. I mean, I have always enjoyed that. And I think that our community is like a great fertile ground for that because it is small and people who are here really love it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, your curiosity plus action has been a gift to Lexington.
Oh,
and we
thank you.
appreciate that.
y'all too. So appreciate y'all.
I think we'd be remiss to not talk on, I guess maybe before we wrap up the podcast, we are sitting at Mill Ridge Farm. Obviously a huge part of your story, your family's story. And then as we think through the future of Lexington and where Lexington continues to go, how you as somebody that's so involved in real estate, also so involved in the farm community, I would love to hear I think you have an incredibly unique perspective on real estate development and the way that Lexington continues to grow. Because I feel like that's obviously something that we always talk about on our podcast. Sure. Not necessarily us that bring it up typically, but just the way that Lexington continues to grow over the next few years. How do you, as somebody that is a private landowner, obviously on the outskirts of Lexington, think through the way that Lexington will grow over the next 20 years and how we can do that in an efficient way?
Sure. I think it to frame it. So as someone who farms thoroughbreds right in town, I think it's incumbent on us and our farm and our family to share our horses and our land. I think for a long time, we as farmers and thoroughbred farmers felt like, my grandmother would be like, don't come out here. Like you can see us at Keeneland and that's great, but that's the turnstile in which you can engage with our product. And Keeneland is a phenomenal asset, an incredible part and a beacon of our community. But as times and tastes change, the story of the horse at Keeneland is magical. And that's a really good athlete in that moment. And you're walking the paddock and you're like, wow, you're marveling at this incredible athlete. And then it runs, 40 miles an hour and runs a mile in a minute 36. And you're like, wow, that was an incredible athletic achievement. And then you turn around, you walk in the paddock and you see another one. And you're like, wow, what fun. And who's going to win this one? And solving that puzzle, that's Keeneland's job, right? But here on the farm, we'll stop after this podcast and go see the newborn foal. And you're like, wow, can you look at how shaky it is on its legs? And can you believe that it stands so quickly? And you're like, oh, yeah, because it's a herd animal. And in the wild, it would wander away from the herd and then it would have its baby and then it would rejoin the herd. And, when we're nurturing these horses, we're trying to nurture that herd competitiveness, but we want them to trust humans, which it's not naturally inclined because we're predators. And so what we do every day is nurture that competitiveness, nurture that athlete, but at the same time trusting us, the human. So then when they leave us, they can accept a rider on their back. And then they can listen when the rider's like, go slow or go fast or go left or go right. And hopefully that all then, when they get to the race, they're like, I love to compete and I love the person on my back and I'm going to do everything I can to get to the finish line first. So that's what we do with thoroughbreds. And so I think it's incumbent on us that you and people visit the farm to have a personal experience with a horse so it's meaningful to that person, and I think the same way about land. I think stewardship of land is really best achieved through sharing, we have some really old trees on the farm and so I should say, and we didn't fully talk about it, but we give tours and you can book tours at Millridge, tours.com or millridge.com/tours, something like that. But it's really been the best thing that we've done in my generation. And my dad, who will stop by every tour he's in town and say hello and thank you. And then he comes in the office, he's like, how lucky we are. It is so, seeing the smiles and the faces on people and how appreciative they are. Do you know how lucky we are? And that's the perspective. It's so good. And so while guests will think that we give a lot to them, like they give so much to us, because it's a fresh set of eyes to experience something that we may have taken for granted.
Yeah.
So I think to frame that, what we can do in horses and farming and land is to do a better job sharing, to help it be meaningful to the person who's also in Lexington. Whether it be the tree, whether it be the sunset, whether it be the story of the tree or the story of the horse, or just why it matters, and I think that so then you can share that with your family, your loved ones, your business, your community. And I think that that's something that we've been working really hard to really connect with people. So then it's meaningful to the community.
Yeah.
And then it can be leveraged to the benefit of the entire community, not just be told how to experience it.
I think it's amazing because I think that we would, when we describe the just really tangible things that people love about Lexington, it would be the asset that you're sitting on today. This is like Bourbon Horses basketball, right?
Right.
But I think oftentimes people will grow up in Lexington and never, they may not even go to Keeneland.
Right.
They don't get to experience that. So I think what you guys are doing is incredibly important.
Well, thank you. And we want to do more of it. I think that's the hope, is that there are Lexingtonians who haven't experienced Keeneland or haven't experienced a farm, and that's, we need to continue to do a better job of welcoming people, because I think that that's the path that people fall in love with horses to go forward in our future generations.